So there's no one doing an introduction here, so you're stuck with me doing the introduction. But I know myself pretty well, so it should go well. Except that this isn't moving along. There we go. All right, so I have a whole slide. I must have known that nobody was going to introduce me today. So I just wanted to let you know kind of a little bit about me. I am currently a teacher in the Natick Public Schools. I've been in the elementary school in Natick for the past 2 years. And prior to that, I taught at Perkins School for the Blind in their deaf-blind program. I have a master's in special education with a concentration in deaf-blindness, a master's in teacher division impaired, and I am finishing a program right now in administrative licensure. I have worked with students of all different ages, all different levels with students with DCC for the past 8 years. And I currently have a student that just moved out of the elementary school, and then I take care of a student actually on the weekends and kind of help to bring her into the community and help her set up some successful times out there. I'm married with a stepson, and I call him a puppy, but he's really actually, he's officially a senior dog. I went to get his nails cut and had to sign off on it that he is a senior dog and he is, threatened of all that. But I still call him my little puppy. So that's just a little bit about me. But I would love to actually kind of get to know all of you and see what kind of walks of life you are. So I'm just wondering if people can raise their hand if they are a parent of someone with DCC. Fabulous. And what about someone that works within the school systems? Great. And in the school systems, what do you guys do within there? I know there are, well, I know 2 of you, so I can say, is anyone else a speech and language pathologist? And what about a BCBA? What else are you? You want to just shout out?
Teach high school physics.
Fabulous. What about you?
Title I reading intervention.
Great. Is there anyone else that works in schools? Yes.
First grade.
Fabulous. So a great mix of everything here. Anything else besides parents or those that work within schools, outside agencies? Yes.
Grandparent.
Grandparent. Oh, how can I have said that? Thank you. Fabulous. I just like to know kind of who everyone is in front of me. Just so you know, I love to have an open conversation when I'm doing presentations. So if you have thoughts, if you have questions, if you have something that you want to share, just raise your hand. You don't have to hold it till the very end. If it's something that I know I'm going to be touching on, I might say, hey, hold that thought, wait till I get to it. But feel free to open up anytime and ask questions and make comments. I want this to be as much interaction as possible. I brought lots of examples to kind of pass around because I think that's usually one of the most helpful ways to get to know things. So as we pass things around, just make sure if you have any thoughts or questions at all. There's chairs up here if you want to have a seat. So this is just some MRI images of the actual effects of the brain, and we're going to go through. The University of Maine right now has a wonderful set of kind of different ways that and I'll show you the exact website and everything in a minute, but it has different ways that the DCC may affect a child. And so we're going to go through all of those different ways that they might have an effect, and then we're going to talk about how that might affect education. And obviously, there's different, they run the gamut, so things are going to be all over the place, so I'm going to try to make sure that at some point I reach something that is going to speak to you, but obviously sometimes kids are higher functioning, some are lower functioning, some are all over different places. So if you have something specific, feel free to raise your hand and let me know. So these are some of the commonly associated characteristics, and as I said, it's from the University of Maine Education and Human Development site. So it's a wonderful site that kind of just goes over exactly what, for someone who doesn't know a lot about DCC, so if you are trying to work with a new educator or a new person that's going to be helping out in your family, it's a great site to direct them to because it's very easy to read, it's very specific, there's a lot of bulleted points, so it's not wordy so that you don't know what you're trying to say, and it's just approachable. So I took a lot of the different things that might happen from there. So some of the health impacts that might have it: vision impairment, low muscle tone, early feeding difficulties, high tolerance to pain, sleep difficulties, seizures, hearing impairment, elimination problems, including chronic constipation. Sound familiar? I'm sure, right? So, what's fascinating about DCC is that not every child has every single thing. And so, kind of setting this presentation up, I kept thinking, how am I going to talk to every single person and reach every person? Because no child's the same. So that's what I think is special about this, and that's what's special about being an educator for students that have DCC, is you never know everything, and you never know everything about a child, and you're gonna reach out, and you're gonna make that, and you're gonna try to use all the strategies that you know, and use what you have to help them to succeed. So these are some more characteristics in a developmental way. So there's delays in activities such as sitting, walking, riding a bike. Speech and language difficulties, especially with expressive communication. Clumsiness, poor motor coordination, and delayed toilet training. Again, sound familiar? Social and behavioral. Socially immature, lack of self-awareness, difficulty taking others' perspectives, attention difficulties and restlessness, and obsessive-compulsive-like behavior. In the final section, some cognitive and communication areas: misinterpret nonverbal communication, difficulty with complex tasks, abstract reasoning, and problem solving, difficulty imagining consequences of their own behavior, and difficulty with slang and sarcasm. So again, what I like about this list is that it's just very concrete, and it tells you exactly different areas. So for somebody that doesn't know a lot about this, it's just an easy way to say, this is how this affects my child. Maybe not every single one of these, but this is an easy way for you to see it, you to visualize it, and you to be prepared. So I think it's a great resource for other people. So now, with all these characteristics, let's imagine the educational implications. And now I want you to kind of think about things. You have your children within the schools. Those are all ways that they affect them as a person, health-wise, behavior-wise, communication-wise, social-wise. How does that affect their education? And I want to write them up so that we can talk about them. Yes? Anxiety, great one. You can just shout them out. I'll just keep writing.
Academic expectations.
Lack of inclusion.
What was that, sir? Yes.
Self-confidence.
Great one. Attention, great. And what was the other one?
Or fine motor.
Great.
Communication issues.
Communication issues between school and home. So
Yes.
if the child's nonverbal, you don't really know what educational implications.
Great. And I am going to touch very specifically on that as well.
Or memory.
Also, I think like it's hard to find appropriate instruction within the school system.
Difficulty concentrating. Interpreting
Right, with comprehension, definitely. So these are ways that I'm going to try to touch on today. And again, this is trying to remember that some students are nonverbal, some students are verbal, some students are reading, some students are not. So it's kind of trying to show you ways that you can use these strategies for any child in order to help them build success. So each of the areas that I have on here, I'm going to go into more depth so that you can kind of learn more about them, see how to set them up, see some examples, ask questions, everything. So we're going to go over schedule systems, social and experience stories. This is just a big thing for me to make sure that you honor students' communication form throughout all activities. And then daily considerations. So that's going to include materials, sensory breaks, fatigue breaks, preparation for new environments, concrete and consistent directions, and reinforcers. So the first one is about schedule systems. I think that how many of you use a schedule every single day? You might not know that you're using it as much, but none of us wake up and just say, hey, let's see what the day takes me every single day. Everyone has a schedule. It helps us feel grounded. It helps us as adults with typically functioning corpus callosum's brains, neurological structures. It helps us to feel structured and grounded every day. So why can't we do the same thing for our students? And I think that's one of the most important things, is that we don't, because a student might be nonverbal, or because a student may not be able to write, we think that they can't write out a schedule, and they can't keep their own schedule, and they can't do this. And a lot of times, half of the behaviors that you're seeing that are being exhibited are because they don't know what's happening. You're just moving them from place to place. You're just saying, now we're going here. You're saying, oh, that was canceled, but, what does canceled even mean? So I think that, refusing to transition from one activity to the next or between steps in a single activity can impact a student's academic progress, socialization, and independence. And I've seen so many students that get stuck. They can't move because they don't understand where they're going. And that's one of the easiest ways is for us to provide that structure and for us to provide a way for them to see it. And you can do this in so many hundreds of ways that I think that's one of the most important aspects of the schedule system. It doesn't have to be, a mental schedule. It doesn't have to be, you sit down and you have first period this, second period that, third period this. It can be in so many different forms. Schedule systems, they build that predictability. They increase independence because you don't have to say, it's time to go here, it's time to do this. They can look at their schedule and they can see on their own, it's time to go here. So they don't need that person attached to them all the time, every minute of the day. They might need support and you'll develop that level of support, but at least it gives them an opportunity and a chance. It increases compliance because they know what's happening. They understand where they have to go, they understand the expectations, and it builds in communication starters. So if your child has difficulty talking or difficulty coming up with a subject, which we just read, a lot of students have that. If your child has that, then you can sit and say, hey, let's look at your schedule. What do you have next? I have this, what do you have? And it's a built-in communication starter for the child. And if you have it in a visual display, you can display changes. So you don't have to just say, oh, that was canceled, let's go, we're going here now. You can show them, and I'm going to show you examples and go through all different ways that you can do that. So how to get started? The first thing is you want to choose a modality. So this is probably the most important part of making a schedule system. You have to know where your child is. Is your child a tactile learner? Do they need objects? Is your child somebody that can look at pictures of something? Is your child somebody that can look at symbols, which is a more abstract way of looking at things? Is your child someone that can write out the words themselves in order to make it, or that can read words that are already written? There's so many different ways, and this is one of the most important ways to make sure that they're successful. Because if you start, if you start too high, then you lose their buy-in right from the start. So I always say, start lower and build success. I've had students where I come in and I say, okay, I don't know if they understand pictures. So I'm going to start with objects, and I'm going to say, we're sitting down for books. Here's a book. We're going to books. Let's bring this book over here. We're going to sit down. And they may be well above that, but I don't know where they are at that moment. And that's a crucial relationship building moment, because I'm coming into their space, I'm bringing them somewhere, and I want them to buy in. I want them to be successful. I don't want them to walk into the inclusion classroom and be very upset from the start, because that's going to be a relationship that's starting right then and there. And they don't know that, but I do. So the easier and the more comfortable I can make it for them. So I always start with as concrete as possible. I start with one symbol. So I say, right now, you have books. Here's a book, let's go. They take their book, they might understand that quickly, so I can move into taking a picture of it. They might understand that quickly, and I can start using a symbol of a book. They might understand that, so you can move along the continuum very quickly. But the more that you can get their buy-in from that first moment, the better. From there, I always try to build on their success. So I want to make sure that I use symbols that are meaningful for them. So if I say, oh, we're going to books, and I hand them, Crime and Punishment, that's not going to mean anything to them. I doubt they're reading Crime and Punishment. This is, for kindergarten through 5, or ages 5 to 12, they're probably not reading Crime and Punishment at that moment. But if I can say, this is their favorite book, their mom brought it from home, I know they love this book. Here, we're going to books. Right from there, you're going to have their buy-in. You're going to make sure that they're interested in this, and they're going to say, oh my goodness, it's my favorite book. Let's go to books. Like, it's great. You built in on their success. So you want to make sure that you use a symbol that means something to them. So a lot of times when I'm developing a schedule system, I have the student help me. I have them in any way that I can. If, they're nonverbal, then I put a lot of different things that might mean tactile. We're going to a sensory time. I'm going to put a lot of different things that are sensory, and I'm going to see where they gravitate towards. I'm going to see where their energy went. And if they were really interested in the string, and I thought, these balloons over here were wonderful, it doesn't really matter what I think. If they're interested in the string, then that's going to be their symbol. So you want to make sure that you choose symbols that are meaningful for them as well. And when you're thinking about partial versus a full tactile symbol, that's if your child's on an object, just really think hard before you do it, because so many times we'll give children a half of a something, and to them that's what the world is then. They don't understand that it's a full bowl. It's a, when you give them a half of a bowl and you say we're going over to lunch, they don't see that as a bowl, because they've never seen that, and they might not be able to process the fact that this half of a bowl is the same thing as that big bowl that they eat. So make sure that if you're going to use a partial symbol, that you know that they understand that it's a half of a something, or it's this. If you aren't sure of that, then stick to the full. Just give them the bowl and say, we're going over to snack, we're going over to lunch. Give them what you know they can be successful with. So these are some sample schedule systems, and I brought a couple just to kind of show you. Unfortunately, I had to ransack my own classroom, and I don't have a student right now currently that's on objects. So I don't have an example of an object schedule system, but I do have some different levels that you can kind of see. So the first one that I have is with a student that we're working on. She is working on photographs, and she is nonverbal. So we have on a slant board, I have a voice output that's very easily programmable for her. So we just kind of change it, and we'll say right from there, oh, she is going to meeting. So I'll say, meeting. And then right on that board together, I have a picture of our meeting area. So to her, this is where she goes every time she goes to meeting. So she knows what it is. We even walked around together and took the pictures. Whether she's understanding, that I'm taking a picture on a camera every time, I'm not sure, but she was a part of the process. She knows where it is. These aren't unfamiliar locations. This is the board that she looks at every day when we're at morning meeting. So she'll come over, she'll hit the button, and then she'll see the picture. She takes the picture with her, she does her thing, she comes back, and this bucket is on the side, because another big thing is termination of activities. It doesn't make sense to children that don't have that level of understanding. So you have to have a way to show them it's finished. We finished meeting, we're all done, we're going to put it into this bucket. And then set up on the board is the next activity for her. So she knows I can hit this, I can talk about my next activity. And we go through her day in that way. The next level up, I can pass this around if you don't see anything. The next level up is once she kind of goes from there, this is a whole day that's programmed in here, and then at the top I also have some kind of big key things that she might want to be able to use throughout the day. So it has a hello, it has a goodbye, it has my turn, and then it has each one of her activities throughout the day. So this is where we're hoping to build, to move towards, but right now, like I said, I want it to be successful, I want it to be something that she understands. So we're starting at this level, and we'll build to this eventually. This is something that I used with somebody else, and it worked well for them, so we have it still. It's easy to set up again. We have a different page in here for every day, and what's great about this, these are relatively inexpensive, and there's 5 programs. So you can set up a Monday through Friday for school right in here and just move around the levels as you go through. Yes.
What's that called?
This is the Go Talk. It's called the Go Talk 9 because there's really 9 buttons from these 3 little ones up here. And they get smaller and smaller. So you can get a Go Talk 20, you can get a Go Talk. So there's all different levels depending on the level that they're able to look at and see and visualize. So this one, and again, you know, for speech, it's a picture of the actual speech therapist because that's the most concrete for them. They don't understand that they're going to work on, you know, she's a nonverbal child, she's not somebody that understands. You can't take a picture of a switch because she uses that all day long. So it's a picture of the actual person that she's going to do that work with. This is another level. So these are for students that are working more on symbols. So this is through Boardmaker, which I'm sure some people are familiar with. So it's a symbol program that you can buy that way, no matter where they are. What's great about this is that it's really reproducible. So you can say, you know, if you moved out of state, you could say, you know, they're working on Boardmaker, this is the schedule, send it with them, and they can recreate these. It's not a picture of something very specific to you or very specific to them. So that's what's great about it. So this child is working, you know, will set up his entire day through here. But again, when I first started, I worked with this child and I saw that they're able to understand symbols. But we started with 1 symbol. So it only had a number 1. He put his schedule on there, and then in the back is a finished pocket so that you can take the picture and you can put it right into here. And that way they know that activity is finished. Once I knew that he was understanding very clearly what the one activity was, we did a 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. We built through our day so that we're not throwing so much information at them that they're gonna shut down. Because again, anxiety is so easy to be induced that we wanna make the schedule as comforting and as understanding as possible. So for this child at this time, their entire day is through symbols. They'll use this, they'll set up their whole day in the beginning, and then they check it throughout the day. And they'll say, oh, I finished my schedule, I finished my morning work, I finished special activity, I finished this. They'll put all of their things into this pocket. This can go with them everywhere. This can be set up in an inclusion classroom. I have students that bring this upstairs every day, and certain grades are working on doing their morning work. Well, this is their morning work, so why can't they sit in that classroom and do the same exact thing at a desk? It's, are they doing the schedule in the same way that every other child is? No, but that's what education is. It's all about differentiating. So it's a great way for them to be in the inclusion classroom, to set up their schedule, to do their thing, and to make sure that they know what's happening, but they're a part of the classroom just as much.
Is this a standard approach, standard technique in the field?
So schedule systems are, in my graduate school we did study them, so they are encouraged, but they're not necessarily always used. I think until you kind of see the power of the schedule system and what it does for a child, there's not as much buy-in, because again, you have to get the teacher and staff buy-in, because they all are individualized, and they should be. You want to make sure that, it's something that speaks to that child, and it's something that is individualized for that child. So it takes a lot of work up front. And so until you kind of get the teachers and the faculty and the administrators, everyone to see that it's worth it, and it decreases behaviors, it decreases anxiety, it increases, a child being a part of everything throughout their day, that's when you get the buy-in.
I think that when
once it's successful and you know it's successful, I always try to put it into, accommodations, which is where I always put it in for Massachusetts. I'm not familiar with every other state's IPs, but for Massachusetts, there's an accommodation section, and I always try to say, put in schedule systems, because if you just say use of a schedule system, it leaves it open, so that, as they progress, they're always gonna have it. But if you put it in there, then you know that they have to do it. It's in there, it says it's gonna exist, they have to do it in some way, shape, or form. And the more you can have, which is another big thing, the more you can have the child involved in the process of making the schedule, the better. Because we can write up a schedule, we can say this is what you're doing, but it doesn't necessarily make sense to them. It doesn't give them any ownership of their day. It doesn't give, you probably don't like waking up in the morning and having people saying, you have to have your coffee at this time, you have to have breakfast at this time, sit down and do this, and then you have to do that, okay? And then you can get in your car. No one wants that. You know you have to, I know I can't exist without my coffee, so I know I need to get my coffee. I know I have to eat my breakfast. I know I have to get to work on time. But I like to do it in my own, order, and I know those are the things that I have to get done. But I also like knowing that, there's an end to work. There's an end to this. And that's what children need to see, is that when they're setting up a day, they may hate math. And they say, I don't want to go to math. But let's build their schedule in a successful way. So they hate math. It's their least successful time. It's not a time that they're looking forward to. It's not a time that you're looking forward to. But they're going to math. It's part of their schedule. They got to go. So build something successful. So they don't like math, but they love arts and crafts. Put in arts and crafts afterwards. Make it so that they can have that time. So they can see, okay, I have to go to math, but then right after math, if I get through it, I get to go to this. Or, lunch is only 2 periods away. The more you can visually set it up for them so that they can see that and they can build on that, the better. And this is just kind of another final example, of just a higher level. So this is a student who writes out her schedule. And again, this is a student that does it every single time when she's in the inclusion classroom. She goes up, everyone's doing their morning work. We don't even have to be involved. We write on the left, this is what you're going to be doing. She writes, and then on the back, she takes her marker while we're just kind of sitting back, not interfering. So she is with the rest of the class sitting at their desk doing their work. She writes out her whole schedule. She knows everything that's happening. It's on a dry erase thing, because you know what? Days change constantly. And it's so hard to just say, oh, that's not happening anymore. Sorry, let's go. So with this, you can cross it right off. It's been here a little while, so it might not come off as easily. But you can wipe it right off, and you can say, oh my goodness, you know what? We are not having snack right after meeting. We have to go to math first. So we're going to put math up here, and then we're going to put snack. Why don't you get your marker? I'm going to write it here. I'm going to erase this. You write it out so that she knows too. Every single change, they should be a part of it. It shouldn't be something that you just say. It's hard to deal with change, especially when you have anxiety about things anyway. So make it so that they can see it and they can be successful in that way also. Yes?
I'm taking the approach now, I know it's completely wrong, but my son gets to 2 or 3 days a week for math.
Uh-huh.
And he asks every day about this tutor. If I tell him ahead of time, he'll obsess about it all day.
Yeah.
I got curious, and I kind of really kind of avoid, I'm not sure, and then we go on, and then it's like, look, he obsessed.
Right, and you know what? You never know what their level is going to be. So if that's something that you know is going to ruin their whole day, so you don't have to. This isn't to say that, if you know there's a trigger, you could just say, special activity at that time. And then right beforehand say, you know what? The tutor is coming, so for your special so you could even say afternoon activity. And that leaves it open. And they might say, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And you say, oh, you don't know, and then at the last, minute you put on their schedule, oh, it's going to be tutor today, or it's, no, don't. This is, no. There's no judgment. You know your children well. So if you know it's going to be something that builds a crazy amount of anxiety that isn't going to be able to be dismissed, and it's not until 4 o'clock that afternoon, then don't tell them at 8 in the morning, But if you know that it's at 8:30, and you're setting up your schedule, and you know it's going to be something that they should know about, and that it's going to help them to prepare for, then let them know. But definitely, if you know that it's a source of anxiety, don't stress and make them go through the whole day. So those are just some sample schedules to show you kind of ways that you can build it in. When to use schedule systems, you can use them for everything. You can use them for daily schedules, like this. You can use them for within class schedules. So it's math class. Maybe they like one part of math class. So let's build it in here. And we say, okay, first we have to do addition, then we're going to do, manipulatives, then we're going to do a worksheet, and then we do the group game. You can set that up just for a schedule within a specific activity. You can do it for transition schedules. So, okay, we're all sitting at this table, and you know that when you say, okay, it's time to go to this, they're just going to get up and take off, and they're going to be running through the hallways, or they're going to drop on the ground, and they're going to scream. So you can say, okay, this is how we transition. We're going to stand up, then we're going to push our chair in, then we're going to walk to the door, then we're going to walk to this line and stop. And you can do this in a written form, you can do this in a picture form. The more specific you can be so they know. But to just say, okay, class is done, go to the other room, it's a huge piece of information. And, they could forget where they're headed towards anyway. So if you can break that transition into more achievable steps, it's a great way for them. Special activity schedules. I think that is one of the most important things. Especially in elementary schools, we love our field days, we love our concerts, we love our, this, we love our that. But for children that are very rigid in their routines and are very scheduled and are very anxious about new things, field days are terrifying. Even field trips are scary. So the more you can make them understand what's going to be happening, for most field trips, the classes have gone on them for years. So they know, this is exactly what we do. So I have a student that last year that was going to be going on the Freedom Trail. They knew exactly which places they were going to be stopping on the Freedom Trail. So I went online, I got a picture of every single one of the places, and as she went along, she just took off the pictures. So she said, oh, we've already gone to this, and it becomes kind of a game too, because you say, oh, now we have to find the State House, we can find the State House. Other kids in the classroom want to join in because they don't necessarily know where they're going. So it's a great way to bring in peer friendships, peer relationships, and to make something that is so huge and complex make sense to a child. So it's a great way to use with special activities and field trips. Doctor appointment schedules. So, first we're going into the waiting room, then we have to get weighed, then we have to, change into this gown, then we have to do this. The more that you can make it understandable, the more likely that you're going to get buy-in from the child. Because they don't necessarily understand. Sensory processing is slower. Their receptive communication might not be as high. They can't ask the questions that they might have. So the more you can make it concrete and laid out, the more likely you're going to have success. And the same with community outings. So if you're going out and you're going to a restaurant, try to prepare them ahead of time. Important things to remember, I said most of these a lot already, but the more independent, the better. It's just a great way for them to have a successful moment, and it's a great way for them to be like every other person in the world, because everyone makes a schedule, whether you do it in your head, or you do it in your iPhone, or you do it on a piece of paper. Everyone has a schedule in their day at some point. So it's a great way to normalize everything and to have them be a part of the classroom, because every classroom, I used to have my student bring their schedule up and show how it might be the same and it might be different from the rest of the class, because the class knows they're doing it. It's not something that's hidden in the corner. It's there. It's pretty obvious. So why not share that information? So I used to have the student come up and the teacher would read the daily schedule for the whole class, and then my student would say, oh, instead of that, I'm going here, and instead of this, I'm here, but then I'm back for this, and then I'm back for that. And, it made kind of the elephant in the room where they're not in the room all the time, but they might be sometimes. Kids want to know. They just want to understand that too. So the more you can be up front and you can say, they might be going somewhere else, but they're just going for this period and then they're back for this period, or they might only come in for this, or they might only, but the more you can be open and honest, the better, I find. Whenever possible, make it portable. Provide a way that you can see that they're finished. I think that's a big one, to be able to erase, to be able to move the symbol, to be able to do something so they understand the concept of being finished. And to make changes whenever you need to. The next one that I think are really important and really helpful, especially especially if you know that there's anxiety about certain things, are social and experience stories. So, as we said, many of the characteristics associated with DCC make novel and unknown situations difficult for students. So if you think about all these things that we just said, they have poor fine motor skills, they have anxiety, they have, all these communication issues, they have a poor memory. So even things that they've already done, they might not remember the process as having already done it. So the more that you can help them to experience and to socialize and to see these things, the more likely you're going to have success with them. So we do this. I have students that were just moving up into, from elementary school to middle school. So we took a nice little visit over to the middle school. We visited every single person that they might meet next year. We met nurses, we met music teachers, we met gym teachers, we met we went into the art room, we went into the office, we went into the classroom, we went everywhere we possibly could, and we took a picture in front of every single thing that we went to. Then we came back to school, we printed out all the pictures, and I said, let's make a book. They chose the order, they chose what goes on the pages, they chose, one of them was nonverbal, one of them is verbal. So one of them was able to tell me exactly what she wanted, and she wanted to say, this is my new school, or this is my nurse, and the other student is nonverbal, so I gave choices. I said, oh, do you want to say, this is my nurse, or do you want to say, this is blah, blah, blah. Do you want to say this, do you want to say that? Which picture should we put next? He was involved in every step of the way. And then we sent it home. So all summer long, he graduated, he moved on, he's moving into middle school. All summer long, he practices with that book. So he can look through and he can say, oh, this is going to be my classroom. This is going to be my teacher. So when he shows up that day, he's still going to have the book. He can match. He can work on saying, oh, look, my teacher, there you are. Like, this is great. He can say, I don't know where the library is. But he's nonverbal, so how is he going to say that? He can flip to a library page, He can do so many different things with the book, and he can experience this transition over and over and over again. So when he gets to back to school, I know that we did everything that we possibly can to make it successful for them. So they're just great ways to kind of see that. So social stories prepare a student for a successful social endeavor. They teach students about a proper routine for specific activities. They help students to practice specific social skills by pre-reading the story prior to an activity. So that's another great way to use them. So if you know that your student is joining Girl Scouts and you want your child to be successful, well, let's talk about a typical Girl Scout meeting. What do they do when they start? What do they do during it? What do they do at the end? There's always the promise. There's always the, I haven't been a Girl Scout in a long time, but there's usually a routine to that also. So if you can get pictures of it, if you can experience that time before they get there, so the things are familiar and things are expected for them, it's a great way for them to be successful. Sure.
As a parent, like my daughter's school does a lot of this, and they use Board Maker and all that,
Great.
but I always fail on doing this at home, because they do it at school so
Yep.
well, just in our own things. So, is Board Maker something, like, is there a website, what kind of resources are available?
Board Maker has a the program itself, I think is like just over 200 for the CD, but that'll give you the library for everything. Yes, and you can also get it on the iPad, and you can also download lots of different story apps on an iPad. That was going to be another thing that I was saying, is it's a great way for the child. So you're going to go, to the farm. Go to the farm, have the child take the pictures on the iPad, and afterwards you can put them all into different story apps. There's Bookabee, there's Story Maker, there's Little Story Keeper. Yes, and you can put them right into PowerPoint. But the great thing that's with these story apps is they're so easy. They are trying to make them
actual apps to make
them. So Bookabee is one.
Okay.
Little Story Maker is another. Storybook. You can even have my iPad that might have some on it. Little Story Creator is another one. So they're great because you can again have them as experienced in the process as you want. So, you know, you're at a farm, point to the animal you want to take a picture of. So they don't even have to be verbal. You can hold up choices and say, you know, should we get a picture of the rooster? Should we get a picture of the cow? And they can make a choice. So no matter what level they're at, they can be a part of these stories. And then afterwards you can say, you know, let's make this great book. And they can, especially on the iPad, you just tap it and it'll move right on. You know, it doesn't require a huge level of skills in order to be able to do that. So that's what's wonderful about that, is to be able to make these stories, to make them come alive, and to be able to send them from there. So if you do something on a weekend, send it to your school afterwards, you know? It's a great way, especially for a child that's nonverbal and can't tell you what they did. It's a great way. So I have some little stories. These were actually done, we did this on an iPad, but I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to pull them up, so I just printed them out and brought copies of them. But these are 2 field trips that I took with one of my students. And these are stories that we made. And then we can share them with home. And then this is actually the student that I take care of on the weekends now, so because she's not in my class anymore. So on the weekends, we'll take pictures when we're out, we'll do all this stuff, and I'll send it to her mom, and then they make a book together, and then she sends it to school. She's nonverbal, so she gets to school, her teacher has an email, and her teacher can see, oh my goodness, they went to the Arboretum today, this time, and then they went out to lunch, and they did this, and it's a great way for her, and she loves it. She gets to see, you know, everything that's happening. So I'll pass these around also, just so you see. They're small, just doodle them. But it's, yes, you can do it in different Android settings as well. Not as familiar with the apps, but if you just Google like Story Maker, it'll come up with lots of different choices. But it's just a great way to share information and to prepare them for things. So if you know you're going to a wedding and they've never been to a wedding before, that's a scary, big process of bringing them to a wedding. And you know that it's going to induce anxiety, and you know that they are not familiar with everything. So why not try to get them prepared for that? Show them a video, I know. So the story is that we were doing a unit on the ocean, and we were supposed to go to the aquarium, and something happened with our van, and we didn't have a van to get on our field trip and we only had it for a short amount of time, so we couldn't get all the way to the aquarium, we couldn't do this big ocean unit, and we were very stuck, so I finally said, well, let's call a grocery store, and let's see if they'll pull out a lobster, and we can go and meet the lobster, pet the lobster, and get to see it, because we only had an hour. So she went to the lobster. As soon as I brought her up there, you know, she reached out, and then she just kept signing. This is her sign. She's going, eat, 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 eat. So we have to make sure we're signing. So I had to explain that, yes, you can, but not this very moment. But that's what's great. You know, it was a really wonderful moment for us, and because we're trying to document, you know, her trips and trying to make these stories, we're getting these pictures. And so for her mom, it was really wonderful for her to see. You know, she's at a residential school. She's not there during the week. She only goes home on the weekends, but like she's happy and she's getting these kind of experiences and she's getting all of this. So these are some other examples. This is a picture of the student at that's her new middle school. And it's another way to practice emotions as well. I always think that it's a really important way to talk about emotions, is to make a little book about it. So what does it mean to be hurt? What does it mean to be sad? What does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to be scared? What does it, you know, all these emotions that we use all the time, and we say, are you feeling scared? Are you feeling happy? You know, they don't necessarily know, so get pictures of them when they're happy. Get pictures of them when they might be a little scared. It might sound mean to get a picture of, you know, your child, but it's hard for them to understand, like, this is what I'm feeling at this very moment. So it's a great time to go through pictures and for them to understand, you know, one of the things that we saw in the beginning was that sometimes they don't understand emotions in other people. So why not make a book of what people look like when they're sad? So why not make a book of what people look like when, you know, they're trying to really concentrate and it might be not a time to interrupt? Make those emotions and those things that they have difficulty with become a part of everyday life. So you make a book about all of these things, and then afterwards you say, let's take a look at him right now. Does he look like he is ready to have you come and interrupt, or does it look like maybe he's in that book where those people are all concentrating really hard? And they can say, he does kind of look like he's concentrating, so maybe this isn't a time I should interrupt. Or he does look like he's kind of sad right now, so I shouldn't run over and try to dance with him. It's a great way to make those things that are hard to understand a little bit more understandable. This is just a big thing in my own mind. I think that communication is one of the most important things for every person, but especially for children that don't have a typical communication form. And so I think before you work with any child, you need to know their communication system, you need to know their communication form, and you need to honor that. Because one of the biggest ways to build anxiety and to build frustration is to not understand that somebody doesn't speak, or that they have an iPad, or that they use sign language, or that they read Braille, or that they, do so many different other forms of something. You need to know that. And I think that that is a huge thing, and that you need to, as parents and family members, need to be able to prepare teachers and educators for that, to say, my child communicates with this, my child does that. And that's, unfortunately, part of being their advocate, fortunately and unfortunately, but I think it's just something that is really important to know. So I put this website, the Communication Matrix, up there, because that kind of goes through all different levels of communication in 4 specific areas, and it's easy to kind of assess and to go through, and then it creates for you a graph, so you can give it to someone and say, when it comes to requests, they're at this level. When it comes to protests, they're at this level. When it comes to this, and it's a very concrete way of showing someone exactly where a child is communication-wise. So that's just kind of something that I think, especially with, as we were saying, communication issues with school, with home, with all of these things, if they don't know where a child is and they don't know where to meet them, then there's no way to build that level of trust and that rapport. So help with that ahead of time. And this is a great way to do it, because you know your children so well that you can kind of go to this site and you can put in the answers to questions, and you can say how a child does something, and you can provide that, concrete evidence to someone. So these are just some other things about every day that you want to think about. Preparing the materials in the student's appropriate media. This is another very big thing. If a child needs Braille, or if they need symbols, or if they need, that's where, as an educator, you kind of have to go to those general education teachers and say, I can't just do this on the fly. I need to know, what you're studying tomorrow, so that I can have the symbols, or I can have the Braille, or I can have the, the large print, or the smaller font, or the smaller this, or the there's so many different ways that we have to adapt materials, and we need to have that time to prepare. So kind of making sure that all those materials, for every child, even if they just need more time with something, then you need to be able to prepare their day as a result of it. So kind of making sure that you know exactly what their media is and how to prepare it and make it successful. This is another big thing that I think that a lot of people don't necessarily think about, is visual, auditory, and positional fatigue. We talked in the beginning that, they get to moments of crawling and walking and things like that later on in life. That they have, a weaker trunk, maybe. That they may have visual concerns. They might have auditory concerns. All of those things are difficult for them. So you have to think about the fact that I had a student who visually, yes, somebody came in, they did an assessment, she could read a 12-point font. And she could. She could read that 12-point font to you for 5 minutes. Very, very well. So she did that test. She passed it with flying colors. Then we got her into the general education classroom. We gave her a size 12 font. She can't hold that size 12 font because visually it's so taxing for her. So if I want her to be successful in the classroom, I can't provide her size 12 font all day long because she's not going to be successful. She's going to be focusing so hard that she's going to get visually fatigued, she's going to get headaches, she's going to get mentally fatigued, she's going to be exhausted because she put all of her energy into just reading that one little passage that you gave to her. So we blew it up a little bit. I got all of the things ahead of time. We put it into a size 18 font. Does she need that to be tested? No, she can read it as size 12, but she can't hold on to that size 12 for an extended period of time. So we blew everything up. We put spaces in between so things weren't blurring for her, and she's completely successful reading in the general education classroom because she can read it in a way that's comfortable for her and doesn't fatigue her. Same thing with positional fatigue. I get tired sitting up for a while, and I don't have, difficulty with that a lot of these students do. So thinking about that, keeping them in the same position all day, every day, with very few breaks is exhausting. It takes all of their energy to hold themselves up. How are they going to listen to anything that you're saying? Because all of their energy is spent just holding themselves up. And you have to think about that. So you need to make a position that's comfortable for them, that isn't taking all of their energy. And I'm not saying, I have students that need physical therapy, that need, that time, but that can't be all day. If you want them to be concentrating on something else, they can't be focused solely on their position. They need that comfort and that ability to do so. So sometimes that means they need to be standing up. Sometimes that means they need to be in a ball that's bouncing. Sometimes they need to be in a more comfortable seat. Sometimes they need to take breaks so that they sit for a little while, they get up, they go for a walk. But to kind of think about those things, not only for attention, but that their position, it takes a lot of energy to stay in that one position. Yes?
How did you discover that she fatigued initially?
We just started noticing that she was having more difficulty after a certain amount of time reading. So when I worked at a school for the blind, so I happened to be a little more hypersensitive towards vision. So rather than saying that it was behaviors, that we knew that she knew the words, we knew that she was capable of reading it. That we just wanted to see what would happen if we blew it up and we tried a different font. And what was most telling for me was actually we do an Ames web assessment, which is kind of it's a general benchmarking for the school. So she was doing her Ames web, and she was having difficulty reading a passage that I know she could read. I was 100%, I'd only been working with her for a month, but I knew with 100% assurity that she could read that passage if I had given it to her in any other way, shape, or form. But she was having so much trouble, and she was getting antsy, and that's usually a sign that, maybe something else is more difficult. So we took the passage just to see what would happen. They read it 3 times a year, but they felt like she was already identified, she was already on an IEP, so the benchmarking was not, in order to see if she needed services. We knew that she needed services, so it wasn't going to completely invalidate everything. So I blew up the passage and did everything, and we timed her for the same amount of time, and she doubled her fluency and halved the errors. So it just showed us right then and there that, clearly, yes, she can read a 12-point font, but it's not something that she can do and sustain. Same with auditory. Maybe they can be in a loud room for a certain amount of time, but you have to always think that auditory information is another way that you're trying to process. So always remember that, loud rooms, noisy rooms, busy rooms, things like that, prepare them before they get in there, and understand that the louder things get, the more they might need a break. They might need to just walk out of that room to a quiet space for a minute and then come back in. Yes?
On preparing them, aside from explaining to them that we're going to be spending time, in such and such situation, and this is kind of what you can expect, is there anything else that is recommended in terms of what preparing the
I mean, again, try to make it as concrete and visual as possible. So I say, we're going from, take a picture of that classroom that they're going to be in. The student that I work with now, her mom is great and brings her in the day before, so she comes in and visits my classroom. She visits her, whatever grade level classroom that she's going to be in for the rest of the year. So it's a familiar environment. It's not like when she's walking in and there's 22 other children, that's the first time she's experiencing it. So just kind of, again, preparing them as much as concrete as possible. So, you know, providing pictures, providing things, even having them, you know, if they've never been in a general education classroom and they're about to start it, watch some videos. There's videos online where you can say, you know, this is what a classroom is like. Listen to it. There's a lot of noise, isn't there? Like, what are you going to do to help yourself because it's so loud? What are you going to do, you know, when it gets too loud? How are you going to let me know? Are you going to get really upset? You know, or just saying, like, I have this break card. Let's put it on the corner of your desk. I'm going to let you know that it's loud. It's going to be loud in there. There's going to be a lot of people. There's going to be a lot of stuff. But I don't want you to start aggressing towards me or to drop onto the ground or to do something else that's maladaptive. So let's put this card here and you can take it and say, I need a break. Like, I got to go. And it's something easy and concrete that they can see, they can tap, they can touch, they can grab, they can give you. Yeah.
They let I just want to share something, but
Sure.
they let our son that are entering kindergarten, and they let him shadow a day.
Which is great.
So he in April went in for the day and went to a couple different other kindergarten teachers. So if they needed to call us for some reason, it was fine. If you could stay, you could stay, there's no pressure.
Right.
He got a chance to see the kids, and it's really making him excited to go to school in the fall. And he got a chance to see what he's going to get.
Yeah, which is so nice. And the more you can,
And
you
he got
know,
to eat
ask
in
the
the
school.
cafeteria.
Yeah, the more, and that's just what we did with this, you know, the students that I had that are graduating, they went with their whole class then, the entire grade, you know, took a bus over and they all went to their middle school. But I mean, that was so many people and we were touring with all these people that it was great that we'd already gone, we'd already visited, we'd already made our books. We read our books that morning, we said we're gonna go see all this stuff. So when we were going, even though it was a big group, it was something that they were familiar with because they had had that chance again. So anytime you can give them that opportunity to do it before the actual big moment, it's great. You know, they're going to a wedding, bring them to a church, show them, bring them to a hall, bring them to, you know, wherever the wedding may actually be happening, so that they have that experience and it's not the first time that they're going to show up to something. So for the student that I have, we found out afterwards she has auditory processing disorder, so she has a lot of difficulty with loud rooms and noisy rooms and things. So the more, at this point, I can just say to her, we're going into a loud room, and that's enough. She's nonverbal, but she understands that concept, so she knows when she walks in that room, it's gonna be loud, and she's gotta prepare herself for it. She used to hate toilet flushing, so if you took her into the bathroom and a toilet flushed, it would be, you know, an hour and a half long meltdown on the floor. But if I just said, hey, I'm gonna flush the toilet now, she was perfectly fine with it. So just trying to give them a heads up on things like that is really helpful.
Question.
Sure.
For, like I said, for teachers and staff that don't understand the traditional fatigue, how would you explain that to being a parent?
There's definitely articles that are out about positional fatigue that you could always show them. But I mean, even just kind of appealing to their general human side, if you just kind of sometimes try to talk to them about the fact that, like, you know, if I asked you to stand up here on one foot for the whole day and then I was going to teach you some calculus, are you going to be in your, I mean, maybe you love calculus, but you know, it might not be in your best time because it's hard. You're taking all of your energy trying to make sure that you're staying on one foot. So I think sometimes just bringing it to a level that they can understand and just saying, you know, they're taking all of their energy to sit, or they're taking all of their energy to do this. So what can we do to build success? And once they see it, you'll get that buy-in. You know, it's just getting them to see it for the first time. You know, if your child has difficulty and is getting upset, and then you get them a different chair and they see all the difference in the world, you know, they're going to be more willing to try things. So even saying, you know, we use this seat cushion at home, right? Let's send it in for them to try. Most schools, if you're providing it especially, will be more than willing to try it. And then if it works, then you'll get the buy-in hopefully across settings. But if not, I mean, if they're educators and they, you know, are interested, then there are actual articles written about positional fatigue in there. Concrete and consistent directions and clear and concise expectations. I think that is a really big thing. And it's hard in schools because, things are changing all the time. But the more you can say, we are going to do 5 things, and then we're gonna stop. And you have to hold to that. You can't say we're gonna do 5 things, and then they do their 5 things perfectly, and you're like, well, that was great, let's throw 10 in there. Because you said, we're gonna do 5 things, and then we're gonna stop. So you have to, honor what you're saying and honor your own expectations. Token reinforcement boards, I brought just a couple different ones. So this is just I'm working for, we put a picture of what they're working for up here. They need to earn 5 Hello Kitties in order to get whatever they're doing up here. They get 5 Hello Kitties no matter whether I got everything that I wanted done. They get whatever they earned up here. And you set the time, so you can say, all right, 30 seconds of, playing on the iPad, and then we're gonna do 5 more. And set a timer, but make it concrete, so you're not just saying, I don't know, 2 minutes this time, like 5 minutes the next time. Like, if it's not concrete, they're not gonna buy into it either. It needs to be that specific, where you say, okay, you earned this much time with this. Set a timer so that it's more understandable for them. And this is another one where, it kind of goes over the expectations. So, quiet hands, sit, listen, quiet voice, and work. Earn 10 things, I'm working for. And then it has a list of what they're working for at the bottom.
I have a question.
Sure.
We're lucky in that our school does do the token reinforcement. The problem is I filled up my son's sort of complicated on that.
Yeah.
Problems that they see at school, we don't see at home. We don't have to use the token reinforcement. I would love to see them fade that out.
Right, and then that's
year,
a big.
And it's funny because he'll forget some days to even use the token system.
And he'll be.
Because he will do it.
Right.
He'll be fine without it. But they haven't officially faded it out, and I don't want it.
Right. That's another big thing is you get kids that are very stuck on, reinforcement and so we had a student that started last year that every single time he earned computer, and we have 1 computer for 11 kids, and I was like, I can't have him earning the computer every 10 minutes because nobody else can ever be on the computer. So we, just due to the nature of the classroom, had to say, you are gonna do your entire day, and then in your schedule, we put a picture of a computer, so you do your entire day, and then you get 10 minutes on the computer. It doesn't, it's not contingent on how many of every single thing that you finished. It's just get through a day, and for the last 10 minutes of your day before afternoon meeting, you get your computer time. So you definitely want to remember that you don't want to create, kids that are so reliant on 10 of these, and then I get something, 10 of these, and then I get something. If they're really successful at 10, build to 20. If they're really successful at 20, build to, 30 minutes. You want to build so that the reinforcer is not the full reason they're doing work. You want to start with, they don't have that intrinsic value of work when they first start, which is why you usually start with something. It's an extrinsic thing that you can say, you get this if you get through this amount of work. But if you can build on that and then build to a more intrinsic thing where they can get through 30 minutes of it because they understand, I'm being successful, I'm doing well, I'm doing this. That's what life is like. Once they graduate and move on, they're not going to get something every 10 tokens.
And my son's 10 tokens is for the whole day. So he really, truly is at that point where
that you could phase it.
we need to.
Yeah, definitely. So that is something to be careful of with that. You want to make sure that you're building towards, the goal is always to build towards intrinsic motivation, so that eventually they don't need 10 tokens and something, because that can happen really easily. Preference assessments, I always think are really important because what I think is really fun, they might not think is really fun. Don't always rely on edible reinforcers. Big thing. Edible reinforcers are easy. Usually they like some kind of food or something, but it's not always the greatest way, and you can't always have stuff. So the more you can start to build towards reinforcers that are in everyday life, so 10 things, and then you get to stand up and go for a walk, because you could be at the doctor's office and go for a walk. You could be in the library and go for a walk. You can't be in the library and, get your iPad video that's at volume 24. You want to build into things that are more easily reproducible and that are possible at all times. And make sure that if you promise them something, you have it. That's another big thing is that sometimes people say, what do you want to earn? And they're like, I want to earn, the iPad, and there's no iPad in your room. So don't say, yes, you can have the iPad, and then be like, oh, we don't have an iPad. What do you want to pick? Because they just did their 10 things in order to get what they chose. So make sure that what they choose is always possible. This is just kind of about training and working with them. Teachers need concrete understanding of behavior management, sensory impairments, and cognitive difficulties, and how they impact daily education. The biggest thing for students with DCC is that you want to make sure that they work as a team. Because as much as, and I didn't put this on, but families, you need to be working with families, PTs, OTs, speech, with every person that is on that team needs to be working together as a team, because you're never going to be successful as a teacher unless you're working with every other person. Because you can have all the greatest ideas in the world, you don't know what's happening in speech, you don't know what's happening in OT. I am not an expert in any of those areas. And I'm not their mom, or their dad, or their grandfather, or their sibling, I don't know them in a way that you do, so every person is bringing something, and the biggest success is to all work together as a team. Just that teachers need support from administrators in working with general education teachers, because I think that's kind of sometimes one of the hardest things is trying to build successful moments for our children in the general education classroom. Someone had said, that it's difficult to get them into the inclusion classroom. That there's a way for every child to be a part of their general education classroom. And I really and truly feel strongly about that. And it's up to the team to develop a way for them to be successful. Whether that be that they only go for specific times, well then make those specific times really, really successful. And in order to do that, you need to have buy-in from your administration, because you need to have that support from above. Because if the support comes from above and it's an expected thing, then no one's going to say, oh, well, you don't want to be in that teacher's room because she's not great about inclusion. Because it doesn't really matter. Everyone has to be great about it, because it's part of the child's IEP, it's part of the child's success, and every child deserves access to that. So I feel very strongly about that, and I think that as a team, any child can be successful. You just have to find that way and that method. So questions? Yes.
Do you have any suggestions on to how to convince administrators and teachers of that buy-in?
Yeah. One way that when I started our school, there was inclusion for students that clearly had academic skills and were able to do it, but there wasn't as much in the school that I was working with. And it wasn't because anyone was against it, it was just because no one had tried it. So what we first started was to actually bring a student or two from the general education classroom into our classroom. And we made it it's just a form of reverse inclusion, where the student was successful because we're in a sub-separate classroom and we were able to have them in an environment that they know, because it's their classroom all day long. And then by bringing peers in, we did fun activities. I wasn't going to say, like, you're coming into my room to math class, I said we're coming in for, a big art project or a cooking activity or something that was going to be motivating. And if you can get the children on board and excited and interested, then you can kind of build the educators. So what our big thing for our school last year was that we were working on metacognition, because they were realizing that a lot of the elementary students, when they were going on to middle school and high school, they couldn't even look on their own faults and things that they had difficulties with and build on that. And that's kind of, a way that you can be successful. If you can say, I'm not a strong writer, I need to work on that. So they were really trying to say, can we tap into that at the level of kindergarten? So when these kids came into my room, we did this big, great activity. It was always something that was very motivating. And then afterwards, I gave them a list of questions. And I said, what do you think went well? What do you think was hard for you? What do you think would help you to be successful in the future? So for our kids, they had a great time with, typical peers. For the kids that were in the classroom, they had a great time with, peers that they don't typically get a lot of time with. And then for the teachers and administrators, I then gave copies of all of these papers. And I said, here are what your kids are reflecting on in this moment. And so they got a writing sample, they got a metacognition sample, and for me, it built a relationship with the teachers because they knew I wasn't going to take these students for 20 minutes and have it be completely non-productive for them. Because, in all honesty, the standards in every state now, they're getting higher and higher, Common Core. There's so many expectations that teachers are terrified to lose 20 minutes. But if you can show them that it's still going to be productive and it's still going to be a moment that builds success and it's a relationship that kind of creates over time. So at this point, now my kids go in for anything and everything, but it's because we built these relationships over time. And it takes time, unfortunately. But once they see the success and the way that you're open, that usually opens doors. Does that help at all?
A little bit. You're an educator, and so
Yeah.
we're going to respect your opinion and the fact that you can do it, and it's just hard as a parent
Right.
to get them to, not do it the same way they've been doing it the last 25 years and look at universal design for learning, things that,
Right, which again, unfortunately comes back to you having to be the advocate
Right.
and you having to be
Yeah.
the one that shows articles and says,
Yeah.
this is what is expected, which
Yeah.
is a lot on you.
well, they say, okay, crazy lady.
I know.
Talk to you later.
But even saying, I would run an activity for
Right.
your classroom and come in and do it, and my daughter or son can be a part of it, Teachers love to give off the work for a few minutes, So if it's an activity and you could end with questions like that where they get a writing sample, then it's a way for you to come in, you to see what's successful and what's not. So then when you're saying, I want my, is it son or a daughter? I want my daughter in the room, you can say, well, when we did this activity, this worked well. Like, it. You're not just saying, like, at home, which is very different. Home and school can be completely different. You can say, at home, this works, but when I was in the classroom that time, I tried this, and it seemed to be successful. That way you have evidence to
Right.
support it, because unfortunately you have to have that.
Right.
Otherwise, you're the crazy mom that's coming in with thoughts and ideas, but if you can say, like, I tried this and I watched it happen, it was successful, which unfortunately puts a lot of work on you. But, sure.
How many students are in your classroom?
There are 11 this year in
How many
grades
are,
kindergarten through 4.
Kindergarten to 4, 11. How many are nonverbal?
We have 4 nonverbal this year. 7.
How many one-to-one aids?
We had this year because we have 5 grades, so we had 8 classrooms to get into. We had 5.
So 5 one-on-ones and then you?
Yes,
So
5.
6 adults.
So no one was a one-on-one. Just
Okay.
because there are 11, there were 6 adults, and then I am somewhat anal in the schedule. So I create a schedule that changes every 30 minutes, and then because we don't have one-on-ones and they're all in different grades and they all go in for different purposes for inclusion, and some of them do inclusion specials, some of them do separate specials. I schedule everyone's day accordingly, so all the staff also get a schedule. I unfortunately don't let them make their own. So
How much teaching time does that give you?
I teach all day long, so what's great is I go in with every child into the inclusion classroom at least once a week. That's just something that I try to set up. And then I touch base with all the inclusion teachers once a week as well, so that I can constantly be talking with them, even though I'm not in the room every day. And then I don't go to specials, and I don't go to lunch and recess, just because we were going to 5 different lunches and 5 different recesses. So it was hard for me to say, like, half my day was going to be sitting on the playground. So what is great about it is that I get all of that time to be teaching and to be working with the children.
So
Which I
each
love.
day, each day your 11 students has time with just you? Okay.
I make sure that I see when I'm setting up the schedules, I make sure that I see every child every day. And sometimes it might be one-on-one, sometimes it might be in a group setting, sometimes it might be small groups, sometimes it might be a full class, because I do try to have, even though they're kindergarten through fourth, I try to have activities that are full class, because I think that it's important for them to have that time together. So we do a book group every week where everyone sits in front and read a book. We usually have an activity that goes with it. And then we break apart for a writing group. And everyone does a writing group in their own form. So some of them are matching a picture to a picture. Some of them are completing sentences with a symbol, and some of them are writing.
You guide the aids.
And so then I lay out exactly the expectations. And every one of the students in my classroom, I have a binder that goes with them as well. So it has a list of all their objectives and then a basic lesson plan. So I want them to have freedom to, they're working on letters that could be doing it in any way, shape, or form, but this is the expectation. Yes.
So the aides that you have, they're aides?
Yes.
So they don't have a teacher background?
No.
So do you have anything, like, if your child is in a typically developing class with an aide for inclusion, do you have anything from your years of training so that that assistant for a child who's mainstream isn't like a hovercraft, so that he or she doesn't know that they're there for him, but just to make sure he's staying on task and to be an extra aid? Do you have any resource like that, so that, because you don't want, like, you build up all this independence and all this self-esteem and confidence, and then the person becomes dependent on that aid. But you still need that aid, otherwise there's no way the learning will continue.
Right.
Do you have
I think that there are a lot of articles out about that. I can, if you give me your email, I can try to send them to you. But also, I think that also comes down on the special educator and kind of saying, like, this is the expectation when you're in that room. I have, maybe a data sheet, I have this, you have these worksheets, but the goal is for them to be a productive member of the classroom, and you're there, but you're not, necessarily there for them only at that moment. So if somebody else needs a little bit of help, you can turn your attention. You don't need to be hovering over the child at all times. And again, that kind of works on the special educator working with the general educator to have that expectation as well.
Even though that aid is assigned to that child.
Right.
But they
can
like
step back
blend
and
into
blend into the. I think that's a.
So there's no like instruction manual.
Unfortunately, no. I know, I do too.
Here you go.
Someone should.
I know what I can tell our kids are from the parents, when it is an aid that's going into the inclusion classroom. When they're not needed, step back and help out.
Right.
And go walk around. The teachers love it because then it's like an extra body.
But you have to make sure that you get the buy-in from the general education teacher, because sometimes they see that as like a threat, even though it shouldn't be. It should be like a woo, kind of extra parent. But you want to make sure that they understand, like, they might be walking around, but they're not walking around to judge you. They're walking around just to be helpful. So have them help in any way.
So you had a lot of experience with DCC children.
Yes.
Where I am, nobody does anything. So I've been giving a bunch of literature to the
Which is
educators,
great.
which they're not reading. So is there a way that you give credibility to what I'm saying, essentially? Is there any way I can get my educator to talk to you and you can simply say in educational speak? This strategy, this method.
That's my email. So you can contact me with any questions, any thoughts, anything. I don't mind at all. I can, send you different thoughts. I can, talk to other people if you think it would be helpful. But
So you need clone.
Depends. Stating from.
I know DCC website though.
Yes.
I know DCC website.
Yes.
It has some of these links that you can print.
Yeah.
I know you can force them to read it, but
Right.
you
But sometimes talking to a person.
Teacher tell me we're going to
Yeah.
BCC are you reading?
go read it. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm just curious, you being a
No.
live person that
I'm more than willing to
email and say,
definitely, yes. If
What do
they
I do?
are open to it, I'm more than willing
Or
to.
even send them her
that you can say that. I'm like, I don't know what team you're from, but I know in our school district, it has to be monitored, so usually like another professional from the district will go with you, just so that if you went in and said, like, the teacher was hitting my son, and I wasn't, you could say anything if no one else is there observing, so that's the only reason they had somebody else come in.
It really creates that,
Right.
you know,
Of what's happening. Yeah.
Or like the students that are with my son are really at the same cognitive level.
Right.
That attorney this morning.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
We went to the healing.
So what he said was to use the special like words like how can we be part of how many of these 108 or how can we have a school system?
Right.
Just
And
want
then
to
they're like,
nonverbal, so
oh,
we
well,
need to
They're great with them.
And
They're great with that.
Yes.
No,
Yeah,
they're,
just starting September 3rd.
they're so great. Yeah, I have two of my former students are, and their parents are very, very beautiful and Perkins.